Do I get to use the gavel?
Oh, you should use it.
Okay, our workshop for March 14th is now in session. Do a roll call. I see Molly, Justice,
Hi.
myself, Ren, Dan, Chris White. We have the mayor may possibly be joining us shortly via Zoom. Ren is here remotely, and our attorney will also be joining us remotely.
And Paloma's here too.
Oh, did I not say Paul?
You said, you
Oh,
looked
did I
at
say
me
Ren?
and said Ren,
Oh.
and then you said Ren again, and anyway.
And Paloma's here, very much here. Okay, obviously we're operating both in person and remotely, as we've been the last few months. And we're going to start this evening with a community segment of a presentation from Mental Health America of Dutchess County regarding casework call summary. Chris, maybe you all can introduce the
Sure.
speakers.
So last March 1st, we began a contract with Mental Health America of Dutchess County to have a behavioral health specialist on with the police department. After a year, we wanted to have Mental Health of America come back and talk to you about that program, give you some overview of it. So we're delighted to be joined tonight by our behavioral health specialist, Lashavius Dicker. And then online, we have Dr. Lisa Connolly, the Chief Operating Officer for Mental Health America. So Lashavius is going to do a little bit of a presentation, then Dr. Connolly will do a little follow-up, and then we can open it up for any questions that you have. And we have renewed that contract. It was a great experience for us, and we are locked in for another year.
So we've been operating under a contract for 1 year so far?
Yes,
Yeah.
we just finished our first year, and now we're 2 weeks into the second contract.
Great.
Yeah, so it's timely to have our guest tonight.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for having me. And my name is Lashavius Dicker. For some of you who I haven't met before, but I am the behavioral health specialist, and I have been working down here with the Beacon Police Department since April of 2021. The program is designed to assist officers on calls dealing with someone who is experiencing emotional disturb or to help de-escalate the situation. As you all know, police officers are our first responders, and they respond to all sorts of calls. Many of them calls are mental health related, and then in the past they will resolve the issue, whether it be taking someone to the hospital to get further treatment, or maybe just calming the person down but leaving, and then that's it. There's no follow-up. Whereas I'm here now, I can help link them to the resources and get the help that they needed. Also, we have their addiction treatment center as well as mental health services. We have Beacon Pros, 451 Fishkill Avenue. There are clinical and professional support services there as well. We have vet services, case management, and a host of other services. So this has been a great partnership with working with the police department, as well as a benefit for the community. And our ultimate goal is to move someone from mental illness to mental wellness. That's the ultimate goal here. Okay, with that said, I'm going to introduce Dr. Lisa Connolly, the COO of MHA, and she could talk about how the program got started and the data that we collect.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on. I truly appreciate it. And as Lashavius said, one of the greatest things we could have done was partner with the Beacon PD. It has been a mutually beneficial relationship, and we couldn't be more proud to work with such an outstanding police department. So that really needs to be said. One of the reasons we started the program, it started in Poughkeepsie. We work, our central office is in Poughkeepsie, New York, so we work very closely with the city of Poughkeepsie PD. And we were going on calls with them and talking to them almost on a daily basis. So it wasn't a huge transition for us to actually partner with them to offer our services. One of the things that happened was it became such a successful program that Chief Frost reached out to me, and him and his team have been fantastic. And we've been able to establish pretty much the same guidelines, and we've been able to really see a lot of positive outcomes to what we're doing here. Now, Lashavius had mentioned that a lot of what we do, but I think one of the most important things that we are able to do is to access resources in the community for people that we come into contact with the police department. And I think that's made a huge difference for people. Not only that, we're able to link them to, like Lashavius had said earlier, we're able to link them to a variety of resources within our own agency, but also throughout the agency. We are aware of every single resource that's available to people. And one of the most important things that I find that we're doing is the follow-up phone calls, whether it's an emotionally disturbed person, as the police refer to people in that situation, or even if it's something as like a fender bender. If you've ever been in a fender bender, you know how traumatic that can be sometimes. So the follow-up phone calls, letting people know we care. Not only that, but times when we're on the street with people, when Lashavius is actually out there with them, which is every day, sometimes people aren't as receptive to our services in that moment. So the follow-up piece to what we do is extraordinarily important. And some of the data we're collecting, we have many goals with doing this project, but what we're hoping to do is, we keep track of the data by making sure we know that every client, every person they come in contact with is linked to a specific service, or if they need, whether it's DSS, whether it's Lexington, whether it's, it doesn't matter. We have access to all those resources so we can get people the help they need.
Okay, now we're going to present some data from last year and up to date till February of 2022. Yes, yes, I can. I think I got it. There you go. Okay. Okay, the first sheet here is a list of calls that I assisted on from April of last year to February of 2022, this year. As you can see, the calls, 137 calls that I assisted on, the follow-up, 110, individuals, 106, and the total linkage, 273. Now, all the numbers are not going to be exact because there's some calls that I weren't here for, that I did follow up, and that I also linked them to services as well. All right, so therefore, the linkage and the follow-up stuff could be, numbers is different than the actual calls that I assisted on. Okay, the first one, 911 calls, there was 4 911 calls. Aggressive patient calls was 5. Calls for service is 20. Community outreach was 12. Disturbance was 26. EDP calls, emotionally disturbed person, 10. The helpline was 2. Homeless, 1. Intoxicated, 11. Missing person, 2. Helping the mobile crisis team, 1. Motor vehicle accident, 1. And NA, 1. And non-difficulty breathing, 1. Patrol, 1. Pickup order, 12. Substance abuse, 1. And suicide, 8. Under the influence is 2. Unresponsive individuals, 1. Walk-ins, 13. And welfare checks are 16. All right, that's calls that I help assisted on. As you can see, some of the calls there could be a lot of welfare calls that maybe turn out to be a family member maybe just call and checking on someone, and they okay, and they just, you know, just want somebody to go there. So there's really no further linkage or whatever, or that is. But so therefore, you know, their linkage and follow-up is a little different. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question about definitions here. So when we say that only 4 of the calls were 911 calls, does that mean all the other calls were like directly to the police department?
Well, a lot of them directly to the police department, and then some calls come from the DC 911, yes.
Mhm. Only 4 came in through 911?
Yes, that I assisted on.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, right.
And we also have Chief Sands Frost here with us if other questions come up, but I know a lot of the calls come in through our main number, 8314111.
Okay, case management on the client linked side. Case management, there was 83 linkage. Total linked to services 127. Treatment providers, there's unique subjects, there's 63. The services was offered. 97 of the services was linked. Community support, there was 16 and 16 linkage. Housing providers, 8 and 10. Medical transportation, whether it's to the hospital or maybe to help someone with their appointment, or even to a stabilization center for someone to, they just need to get out of their environment that they're at. That was 6 and 6. Self-help group, that's peer services, is 6 and 6. Doctors, 4 and 5. Food pantries, local food pantries, maybe the church or Salvation Army, 2 and 4. Clothing, like Salvation Army as well, 1 and 1, and medication programs as well, 1 and 1. Referrals, 13 individuals that we referred to. 9 of them, 10 of them we got referrals for case management services, for behavior and mental health. There was 2 referrals for Children's Health Home. We do have a Children's Health Home care management program as well. That was 1. The Detox Center was 1. Our Vet to Vet program was 1. And substance abuse treatment was 1. So that's all the referrals that were made for MHA.
I think my question with this section is if there is a document or a way that we can communicate to the public what these resources are that you're referring people to, so that they might self-refer themselves a little more easily, and if that's something that the city can provide.
Well, we can also go on our website, mha-dutchess.org, and there's always a list of services there. If someone may have a family friend or a relative who may need some services as well, they can go on our website. And I mean, we have a host of services that they can, call.
Got it. So that's the place to go for that information.
Yes, mha-dutchess.org.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Connolly, would you like to add anything
Sure.
to the?
Yeah, I just wanted to make something a little clearer. When we talk about linking versus referrals, some of those organizations just require a phone call, and that's what LaShavia's can do, but some of those organizations actually require an actual referral. And sometimes only a doctor or a prescriber or a therapist can actually refer to that organization because they require certain documentation. So I just wanted to make sure that you were clear on the distinctions.
Yeah, and I know from experience that sometimes even if you have a phone number, it can be intimidating or difficult to make that phone call. And so I really appreciate that part of what you're doing is making that phone call.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
and whatever we can do to make it easier for people to actually sort of walk in that door, I'm glad that we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a big part of what Lashavius does, is he tries to make it so much easier for people, and we will walk them through it. We will take them there if need be. We can provide transportation. There's a number of services that we can offer for individuals.
Okay. Any more questions?
Dr. Connolly and Lashavius, yes. Hi.
Hi.
To me, kind of in the general public, it seems like these kinds of collaborations are kind of new territory, mental health providers linking with police departments. And I don't know if that's a misunderstanding of the facts from, my point of view. So I'd love to hear, a little bit more about your history with this kind of work, and then also in looking forward, or even in your day-to-day work, if it is as new as it seems to me, what best practices or evidence-based practices are you looking to for this collaboration with the Beacon Police Department, or are you kind of writing the book for these kinds of collaborations?
I think they've been tried, not to the extent that I think we're providing these services for people. Like I said earlier, what we started with was the City of Poughkeepsie Police Department, because we've worked so closely with them for so long, for 20 years. So we kind of knew what they needed, and they were always like reaching out to us, hey, can you help us with this person or that person? And it just became such a need. I don't know if there's been so many police departments that have reached out to us since we started this program that have required are asking for our assistance. We'd like to expand the program with Lashavius being in the lead and our other behavioral health specialists in Poughkeepsie, Linwood Burke. I would like this program to grow immensely. I think we have the potential to grow it. I think that they are doing extremely valuable work. And it is kind of like a pioneer project. It's a pilot project that really hasn't been done anywhere, at least in Dutchess County. And I could probably expand further, but I don't want to say anything unless, I want to say New York State, but I know that there's other organizations out there trying to replicate what we're doing, but not quite, not to brag, but not doing it quite as well as these guys are doing it. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Is there a criteria for the calls that you do and don't respond to?
No, there's no criteria for calls. Like, you can get a call for maybe a domestic or maybe an accident call. And someone, especially in an accident, someone got into an accident, they could be, the anxiety or whatever. They could have a mental illness, and they may just need someone to talk to. Whereas I'm there just to help the officers. That way they can focus on getting information, and I can help the individual, remain calm and get them past it. But it's no really, like specific calls that I go to. If I can be assistance to any calls, then I'm here.
So while you're working on your shift, do you respond to all calls during your shifts while you're working, or most calls?
Well, if I'm with the officer, because sometimes I ride with the officer, and sometimes I would, we meet them at a location. So if I'm riding with an officer, so every call they go on, I'll be there too.
I have a question, but it's come up a couple times here about the idea of whether or not there's more work for you than you can handle as an individual, and I think you've made clear that that's not the case, that you feel like, given the demand in Beacon, that you're able to meet it. But if you can talk a little bit about that, I think that would be helpful.
Well, as when I'm on, calls can come in, a variety of calls, whether, some days might be a lot of emotionally disturbed calls or mental illness calls, and then there's days where you're not dealing so much with that. You're dealing with maybe could be just an accident or something else, or maybe a domestic. So the volume of calls that we get monthly, probably for a mental health, will be ranging from maybe 25 to 30 possibly calls a month. And then there's other calls that we do assist that may not be recorded, you know, so, as of right now, the volume that we get, the volume is called for me to be there. That all depends on if anything's increased as far as having another worker. But right now, you know, I'm able to handle the amount of calls that we get.
If there was another worker, would it make more sense for them to overlap shifts with you, or would it make more sense for them to be working when you're not? So to have somebody on, say, 24/7 because you're working 8-hour shifts during.
I work 8-hour shift, but we also have, you know, the mobile crisis center, mobile crisis team, and they are 24/7. So if there's calls out here that, you know, mobile crisis team could assist after hours that I'm not here, you know, but to have someone working will be, if we need another second person, that will be in the evening time.
How often so when you're not working, does the mobile crisis team come in and respond to, say, a mentally disturbed person if nobody reaches out? Like, how does that work?
Well, if they reaches out, if someone called the helpline.
Would it be, an individual?
They can call mobile crisis directly. The Beacon Police Department works very closely with our mobile crisis team, so they have the direct number and they can call 24/7.
Right, that's 24/7.
So just to clarify, is it the responsibility of the individual in crisis, or the parties in crisis, or the police department to call the mobile crisis team when?
Well, if they call the police department and the police department respond, if they need assistance, they will call the mobile crisis team to come out and help them.
Okay.
Okay. But I mean, if someone could call directly themselves to the mobile crisis team. If
Yes.
they feel, and someone would come out immediately and assess the situation for them. And if they need to get help, they can, you know, help them get to the hospital and get treatment.
And certainly if Chief Frost and the team decided that a second person was needed, that's certainly something we can look at.
So if somebody were having a mental health crisis, if they were to call the mobile crisis team, would the police come in response with the mobile crisis team?
The mobile crisis team will call, if they deem the police to come, then they will call the police and have them meet them there.
I have a question that might be more for you, Chief Frost. This might be out of the purview of the contract with Mental Health America, but the idea of support for police officers to do at least some of what Lashavius is doing in terms of skills you have and how to talk to people who are going through a mental health crisis.
I'm sorry, I've lost all visual.
We can hear you, Lisa, and see a little bit of your video. Yep.
Just to repeat the question, I didn't know if there's any talk about you working with the police department to help the officers learn some of the skills that you have in terms of how to talk to people who are going through a crisis, some of the techniques that you have, that particularly when you're not there, that they might be able to employ, even if they then need to pull you in after the fact for the full range of skills you have.
Yes, we do have a de-escalation training with the instructors here at the police department. Actually, there's one scheduled next week, the 22nd. So we do give a de-escalation training to help them, you know, in a situation if I'm not there.
And is that one that Mental Health America puts on? Is that how it works?
Yes, we
yes.
We do the training.
Great. And does that take into account cases that you've seen now that you're here, you're kind of in the community, and you're able to kind of talk through in the context of the safety of that training?
Cases we've seen and cases and other experiences that the other behavioral health specialists may have had in the city of Poughkeepsie, dealing with, you know, on calls as well. It's like a collaboration of here and there.
Great. And this might be very off topic, so Chris, feel free to tell me it's for another time, but I'm wondering what mental health services are offered to our police officers, if that's something we currently offer them if they need it.
We offer mental health services to all our employees through the workplace. We have an employer assistance program, and so anytime we have employees with mental health issues or addiction, we are able to have them access those. I'm not sure whose feedback we're getting. So, and the police are welcome to use that as well.
Thank you.
Just following up on something that was just discussed with regards to additional service, additional people.
Additional person?
What measures would we be looking at to determine whether or not we are in need of another person? Are we looking at, cases not followed up on, too many calls where nobody's on staff? Like, what would you be looking for to make that determination?
I don't know what
would he be looking for?
That's something
What would
that,
Chief Frost be looking for?
Chief Frost, the city administrator, Chris, could probably maybe answer that. So I don't know.
I mean, this was a discussion we had when we renewed the contract. We wanted to understand that the scope of work we were giving Lashavius and the support behind him was adequate to meet the need. And we felt that it was. A good thing to keep in context is Poughkeepsie has a full-time worker, and they are more than twice our population, and their call volume is much higher than ours. So they've been able to make it work. They would probably be the first candidate for two if they were going to go to another shift. So we can continue to evaluate it, and if at some point it warrants a part-time or full-time additional staff person, we can look into that.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating for that this second, but I'm just wondering, like, what are the measures that we would keep an eye on to know whether we're at that point or not?
I think I'd hear from the chief right away if we weren't.
All right, great.
He's not shy about telling me.
Okay.
In a very good way.
I don't know. I agree, or I can see fairly clearly sort of what we're discussing, that the workload for you is fairly reasonable, and from what I understand, your job description is fairly reactive in that you are following up on cases that come to us. But I also know that you are running the Let Us Know campaign and trying to be proactive in asking members of the public to come to you ahead of time. And I'm curious how that program is going.
And Lashavius, would you just give a little background on the Let Us Know program so people who are tuning in and might...
The Let Us Know program?
Yeah. Well, how does that work and what does it do?
Well, the Let Us Know program is something that you let the community know that the resources that they have that are available to them. A lot of people don't know the resources, and if they know that there's someone out there that can help them, to give me a call, then I can help link them to the services that they need. Basically, getting information out there. So that's also part of outreach, going out there, community outreach, is getting out there, letting the community know that we're here and we are available and we're here to help them.
And it also is helpful in particular cases where a family member or a friend knows of somebody who's experiencing mental health issues and can give the police a heads up, so there's a context. Like if there's a call to come to a house, the police already know that there is underlying mental health issue, so that they can make sure that Lashavius is there, or the mobile crisis team is there, and react appropriately. So it's kind of giving people a heads up, like, hey, I'm worried about my neighbor. They're not acting like they usually are, and that way, when a call is generated or if a welfare check is needed, they have a heads up on that.
I'm thinking about this also in terms of Mental Health Awareness Month coming up, and we have at least one sort of community-based group that's really invested in making sure that we are being proactive in making sure people are being connected to the resources that they need, and I'm hopeful that maybe the Let Us Know campaign, or that there's some way that the city can be partnering with local organizations to heighten that awareness. I don't know if there's any specific plans within the Let Us Know campaign to be proactive, particularly in the month of May, but would love to see that move forward. And I'm also curious, there is a specific training that I've been hearing about, we've been talking about police training, but for the public called Mental Health First Aid, which is a national program. I don't know if anyone else has heard of it. No, not so much. Okay, that's fine. But the sort of purpose of it is to train like civilian de-escalation training, not to be responding to, super acute issues, but that's the first aid part of the name, and the idea there is to just give regular people the tools to be addressing mental health a little bit more.
Actually, our organization is part of that. We are doing we're doing the trainings. We're doing the train the trainers. Our vet to vet program is heavily involved in that. We have a lot of other individuals within our organization who are stepping up to do the training and then provide it for others. So yeah, we're heavily involved in that as well.
That's great to hear. And would love to sort of, my understanding of how that training works is that it can be for sort of any level of civilian, and would love to see that program expanded.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Savis, and thank you, Dr. Connolly.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, next we have on the agenda is the appointment of Sara Morris to the position of Human Resources. I believe Sara is going to be joining us remotely.
Yes, she will be in a minute. And if I could just give a little background for people, the city hired for the first time in mid-2020 a shared part-time human resources director, or director of human resources. As you may know, when Gina Basili left in late December of last year, we talked to the mayor about converting that into a full-time position. We did post the job. We had 63 applicants for the job that we narrowed down to 9 finalists. We broke that down to 3 people that we interviewed, and Molly was on the committee that did the interviews with other city staff, and we unanimously came to decide upon Sara Morris as our top candidate. And Sara is with us tonight. She would have been in person, but she has a very bad cold, so I just want to thank her for coming on, and I'd ask her to give a little introduction, and then if you have any questions, we can go from there. So, Sara, I'm hoping you're on and feeling a little better.
And it looks like the mayor is also on now as well.
And our attorney, Nick Ward-Willis, is on, too.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, Sara. We can hear you.
Oh, hi. Hi. Good evening, Council. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, and I don't normally sound like this either. So if you can bear with me. So my background has been primarily in human resources. I have over 14 years experience working in the HR field. Early on in my career, I started out in the private sector working for a manufacturing company, and this is down in the city. So I stayed there for about 4 years, and that was really my introduction to HR, overseeing benefits and compensation, recruitment, labor relations, employee relations. And then after they were losing a lot of revenue per month and they were closing their doors, so I decided to transition into a nonprofit. And so I worked for Animal Care Centers of New York City for 5.5 years. And one of the things that I'm very proud of working there is when I came on board, they had not ever had an HR professional there. And so it was a great opportunity. I was able to set the tone. HR is not a department where complaints go to die. And so I was really able to build relationships with the staff and upper management, able to centralize HR, create policies and procedures, put some structure into place. And it was a feel-good organization, and I had a great time when I was there. I did leave because I moved back upstate, and I was commuting for a few months, and I'm sure you know has a shelf life to it. And so after I left there, I went into the public sector, into local government. And so I worked for Sullivan County for about 2.5 years. And there, I would say the major difference between the private and public sector in terms of HR is the Civil Service Administration aspect to it, and civil service law. Some differences in the Taylor law, but anyway, I was there for about 2.5 years, concentrating on Civil Service Administration, labor relations, training, conducted confidential investigations, and so forth. And then the shared services position came up with East Fishkill and Town of Wappinger. And so I transitioned to that role where I am currently. And so that's kind of a brief summary of my working experience.
And as we were considering candidates, we had a lot of strong candidates on human resources in the private sector, but not many of them had that overlapping experience of doing it in the public sector, where you're dealing with civil service, which is its own whole system, and then also working with unionized employees. So Sara was very experienced with dealing with contracts. In fact, one of the first things she asked me to do was send her contracts to read, which made me very happy. And Molly was on the committee. Molly, do you want to say anything about our?
Yeah, I'll just add with the contracts, there was actually, not to give away anything that was said in the time, but that we actually had a little discussion about negotiation, about what was being offered for Sara, and to see Sara, it was a great example of how she operated. I will also say that Sara said some really wonderful things about what attracted her to Beacon, our diversity. That was really key to her, and she shared a great story, which she might choose to share with all of us on her own time about why that's important to her, and I think that's something that she can really bring to this community, and something that I know is important to many members on the council as well, how that lives out both in our hiring and throughout the tenure of all of our employees.
Thank you. It's gonna make me cry.
You'll feel better.
It's really near and dear to my heart, and I've put diversity and inclusion into practice throughout my career, and I can share wonderful stories with you. I'm still in contact with so many employees. It's important to me that the employees know, as I said, that I'm a support system, a resource, an advisor. And so, that's my goal for this position, and continue the initiatives that you have in the City of Beacon, and be proactive. So.
And this really will help take us to the next level of professionalization of all of our departments. And that's been a goal of the mayor and mine, and Sara really can help take us to that next level.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the fact that we're investing in a full-time HR person. It was dramatic when we hired the part-time. I think it began to change things. I can't believe that the City of Beacon has existed this long without an HR person. So I'm very happy to have a full-time one. I think it'll be great.
I think the mayor is on, but the mayor had kind of a rule of thumb about the number of employees. Lee, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the general rule of thumb is one HR person per 100. That actually works pretty well. I'm sure that Sara would confirm that kind of rough number. So we're kind of overdue. And it makes a lot of sense. And given that, also, we're unionized, we have civil service, all those add a lot to the problem. And I'm looking forward to Chris having more time to focus on other things as well. I'm welcome aboard, Sara, as I said to you the day you took it.
Thank you. I can promise you I'll hit the ground running. So, hopefully not too long to get caught up to speed.
So our goal would be to bring Sarah's appointment to a vote next Monday, the 21st, and her start date would be March 28th.
Well, hopefully she won't be sick then and have a sick day.
And she doesn't have COVID, I'll just tell you that now.
This is an oddity for me. I usually don't get sick, so it's been lingering.
Okay, well, I guess we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay.
In person.
All right.
And Lee, if you want to take over the reins, you're welcome to anytime.
No, you're doing great, George, because it's a lot easier to do it in person. So I'm happy to watch you shine at it.
Okay. I didn't want to step on any toes. Next on the agenda, we have the appointment of Esther Jackson to the Conservation Advisory Committee.
Yes, I'll briefly talk on this, George.
Yeah.
Bam.
The mayor and the city administrator's office received Ms. Jackson's application materials from the current chair of the Conservation Advisory Committee. She comes highly recommended. Her applications were overlooked by Mayor Kiriakou. They've been provided for you as well, and she's being recommended by Mayor Kiriakou for your approval. Your consent, rather.
Yeah, and again, under the code and charter, the mayor appoints, the council has to consent.
Does anybody have any questions about that appointment? No? Everybody good?
I have just a quick general question. I don't know if Chris, if there are any other boards, or maybe CAC is one of them, that are needing membership right now, just an opportunity to get the word out to the public, if there's anything else that you're aware of at this moment.
We can go through and figure out what we have openings in, and I'll bring that back to you.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you.
There's actually a document on the shared drive.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
I don't
know,
know
for
if it's an
example,
update.
the recreation committee is very low right now, but when we talked to Mark Price about it a couple weeks ago, he said that now is not the time for people to apply because we're going through stuff, so I don't know if that's necessarily a sign of wanting members to apply right now and then maybe waiting several months before they hear anything.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to just, if we have time in a workshop in the future, for the public review what all of our committees are. I know that we got that in our orientation, but just a refresh for the public on where we are at with all of our committees.
Okay, next on the agenda is authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with Miller's Touch Cleaning Services Incorporated for cleaning services for the City of Beacon Park's bathrooms. Chris?
So this is a continuation of a pilot program we did last year. We opened the public bathrooms for the first time in a generation at Memorial Park and Green Street, where we actually have brick and mortar bathrooms. Last year we used Miller's Touch Cleaning. They did a fabulous job. They did a daily cleaning for 6 months of the year. So we went out to RFP for these services again. Miller's was very, very close to the price they gave us last year, and Mark Price, our recreation director, would like to award that to them. So they will begin regular bathroom cleaning May 1st, and it goes through the end of October. You'll also see a part of this for cleaning the theater at the University Settlement Camp. We do rent that out for weddings, and so they just come and they do the cleanup after weddings that we charge back to those events. So there's a first-time cleaning and then a regular cleaning, and they've done a fantastic job. We only had one incident last year, and it was cleaned up. Like somebody posted a photo of what happened, and it was cleaned up before the next morning. So
Are the folks doing the cleaning also the ones locking the bathrooms at the end of the day?
they do lock them at
Okay.
the end of the day when they're done. Yeah.
So I'll just let you know, in Green Street Park, on 2 occasions, I saw a pickup truck drive into the park, and someone got out and locked up the bathrooms. And they drove very fast
Okay.
on the grass, and there were kids everywhere. So it wasn't
Was it a city truck?
a city truck, no. No, but I didn't know
Okay.
who it was or anything, and I didn't want to, but just some feedback to like park on the road and walk to the bathroom, please.
While we're talking about public restrooms, I know I've been hearing interest to try and add one, potentially to loopers particularly, and I just wanted to remind all of us where in the agenda that shows up. Is that in the recreation study? Is that
It would be in the capital program. So
Okay.
we're going to be bringing you a capital program in April or May, and we've been trying to get some kind of cost guesstimates on it, and figure out where we have water and sewer down there. I would like them eventually at Riverfront Park as well, at Pete and Toshi Seeger Park.
Yeah, it's another
So-
good location.
I think with Pete and Toshi Seeger, we were depending on some kind of like restaurant or a little shop to open up down there, and then they would provide bathrooms, but that doesn't seem to be happening, I guess. Yeah.
There's a scenario in which we might get water and sewer down there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Going back just to Miller's Touch Cleaning Services, it doesn't sound like it was a matter for discussion, but I was pleased to see that they're a locally owned and BIPOC-owned or a minority-owned business, which I thought was great to see that play out in action here in our city.
Yeah, they're out of Newburgh, and they're great. We actually use them at the condominium where I live in New Paltz, and they've been fantastic. And I didn't even know they were bidding on this, so when I saw their name, I thought, well, this is great, because I know they do a good job. And they have other jobs, so like this is at the end of the day, and it really worked out that they could come in, do those other jobs, and then finish at the end of the day in Beacon.
That's great. Having the bathrooms functioning, again, is a great addition to recreation here in Beacon.
Agreed.
Okay, next, we have authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement for municipal center roof replacement. That would be this building.
Yes.
Chris?
In the capital program for 2021, the city authorized $305,000 for the replacement of the roof. The bids came in this morning. We received 6 bids. The low bid was VAD Contractors, Inc., which was $199,800. We're doing our due diligence on that, but I just wanted to give you some advance notice because I will likely be bringing a contract or an award of bid to you next week. We're also preparing quotes to take the solar panels off the roof and then reinstall them. So there's going to be a second contract that will also come under that. And even with the 2 aspects of that, we're still well under budget, which was great news with a lot of the other bids coming in high because of materials and fuel and labor.
When would that work begin? Sorry, George.
No, go ahead.
We hope this begins in April. Yeah, and it's maybe a 5-day job.
So we'll have one open air meeting.
No, you'll be fine. I won't have them shooting the guns with the, they'll be done by the time we meet, hopefully.
Would there be any concern with having the roof done and then having the solar taken out, the roof done, and then solar being put back on by 2 separate companies? Would it undermine the warranty on the roof?
It does have a complexity with the warranty, and we went back and forth on this. We thought about not putting them back on, but I don't know that that's the message we want to be. I mean, it's not a large solar array, but it's, I think we want to be going the other way and putting more solar on. Right. So we judged it as, it does have some impact, but we talked to a number of solar installers and roofers, and they thought that the risk was minimal.
Okay, great.
You think about it, people every day are putting solar panels over asphalt shingles. So, making sure that the underlayment, again, they're going to replace any plywood that has rotted out over the years. This is the original roof, a 30 or 40-year architectural shingle, and then we will have a professional installer put them back. And they never leaked when they put them in the first place, so that bodes well. And we're probably going to use the same company, but I need to get a couple more quotes.
Great. Okay, and the final item on the agenda is discussion of City Council rules and regulations. And I'm going to give this to Molly. I know that Molly, Justice, and Paloma have been working actively on this together.
Yeah, so just to give the public a little summary about this, that we, as for those who listened into our first meeting of the calendar year, that every start of the year that we talk about rules and procedures, and there were some questions then about some of the wording, but we decided to go back and work on it later. And then there have been some things that have come up in some of our public comment sessions that make us feel like it was more of a priority. So as George said, Justice, Paloma, and I worked on some of the language around this. And so I can go over some of the general proposed changes, and then what I wanted to do with the council, which is kind of take a step back, or at least half a step back, and just talk about some of the concerns that have been raised or why the language is as it is, and make sure that we're all feeling good about this, and then we can talk about the language. I don't think we'll be changing or approving anything tonight. I assume that would wait for one of our voting meetings. And then we also have our legal counsel online. There have been a couple of things that we suggested that they said actually might want to adjust that, so if there's anything that we talk about that we want to change again, they might have their own thoughts about what's there as well. Justice, before I get into the discussion, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you hit everything pretty well. I know Molly, Paloma, and myself have put a lot of thought into coming into this, and we also wanted to make sure that this conversation was happening transparently and for the public and for the rest of the council to be able to contribute, and especially for the veteran members of the council to have input, because Paloma, Molly, and I are all coming into this fresh and new, but I know that the language was changed to what it was with reason, and we want to make sure that people who have experience and who have been going through public comments as well on this side of the table also bring up things that we may not have experienced yet or don't understand. And we also want to make sure that the reason that this is coming up again is because how the public has been directly interacting with us, the council, but we also want to make sure that in this language we're not doing anything to harm other city employees as well in these changes that we're making. But yeah, no, for me, this is really huge because I want to make sure that we as a council are being held accountable. And yeah. Paloma, do you want to add anything else? Or I'm ready to get this conversation started.
Great. So I'll just go ahead and open it to the floor if anyone wants to share their thoughts. The public does have access to the language. We can talk about that, but I was thinking maybe to start generally with what you've experienced and what you hope the tenor of the conversation is between us and the public.
Well, I think what, you've begun to clarify, and, obviously the goal here is to allow the public to speak as openly and, easily as possible, and for us to listen as intently as possible. And some things are not pleasant to hear, but I think that's also part of the job. And I'm not afraid to, hear people say things. I think sometimes it's gotten out of hand. I've been on this council for 13 years, and we've seen quite a cast of characters come through in front of that microphone sometimes. And but 99.9% of the time, it's respectful and effective. And even those times where someone might say something slightly out of hand, I personally don't mind. Even if they attack me or if they say something to me that's, libelous or whatever, or accuse me of stealing, or whatever, or benefiting personally on it, it doesn't bother me that much. But what does happen is I tend to turn off those people, and I stop listening. So, the speakers also have to understand that for us to listen, it has to be mutually respectful, and we have to figure out how best to hear and how best to speak. So I hope the public also knows how, if they want to get a message across, there's effective ways and there's ways that aren't going to help their argument at all. I think part of this discussion, I've seen it deteriorate over time, and I think in part it's due to our habits developed on social media and our ability to say things and have no effect, no immediate effect. You're almost anonymous. So I think we have to steer clear of that, maybe some bad habits that have been developed behind your, touch screen. But I really appreciate the effort that all of you guys have put into this thus far, and I think everyone's goal is to listen and to be able to speak their minds. So thank you.
Yeah, if I can add something.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised this language has lasted as long as it has. It was put in, I want to say like a dozen years ago, and I kind of looked at it at the time and I thought, whatever. But I think George said it right, which is the right language is about speak your mind, but be respectful. And, as long as that's the case, we'll get there. And the respectful is really important right now because, at the national level, we've lost some ground there. And I think we need to try to gain that back. And we set an example by how we do that. And again, I think that mix of you speak your mind, doesn't matter what the topic is, but figure out how to be respectful in doing it, I think is a very good approach. And generally speaking, the language does that. So the proposed language.
Yeah. I do just want to say that I don't think any of us here want to see or experience verbal abuse on this council, and we don't want to, that's not something that we want. But in the same time, we want to make sure that when the public calls out actions that we do on council that impact them, and when they have comments on what we're doing, that we're not censoring them or making them feel like they can't be heard, but rather we want to make sure that we're listening, and we want to make sure that this platform that the public has to speak on the issues that they have, and especially with us, that they can be heard, and that we're instead. The last thing that I want to do is see us hear something that the public says and dictate that they can't say that anymore, or they can't talk to us. What we should be doing is figuring out ways that we could continue to listen and continue to move conversations forward. And like I said before, I really do want to be held accountable, and want to see us do that. And I'm really... I really do appreciate the thought and work that went into putting this revised language in here.
Ren or Dan, do you have anything you want to add, or Chris?
I have a couple things. So in section H, it says shall not include direct criticisms. That language is still there. It says the last part of the new H says the public shall follow the same rules as above, and in addition shall not include direct criticisms. That's referring to direct criticisms of city employees, right?
Correct. Okay. So yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So we're getting, for the public, we're getting a bit into the language of it. So no. I think we might be time to go there. So I just meant I wanted to make sure, as this is about the public, that the public had time to catch up with Section H. So. But yeah, so one of the key changes that we made was to differentiate between what we as a council were fine to have direct criticisms of us versus what criticism that someone might have of an employee or someone they've interacted with. And we actually felt that public comment was not the place to criticize an employee. If they had that, they could take that to Chris separately, whatever your process is for that, but that they were able to talk about us separately. Chris, I don't know how you feel about people making direct criticisms of you, because you sit at the table. I didn't put it in there, but I didn't know if you had any instinct.
I think I'm fair game, Molly. I mean, I'm kind of shy and bashful about pushing back when people say things, but I think I can manage.
So you think if we added in city administrator to the list of people? I was going to leave off the attorney, but I don't know.
I mean, he's a city employee. So.
He is. So, well, we could call that out specifically. We could include language that said any other
I
employee.
think you're leaving a lot to the mayor's discretion, and I think he knows that his administrator can
That's true.
roll with some punches.
Oh, so we don't have to.
But I do appreciate you putting that in about employees, because it's not fair to have that without them being here to defend them. And
Yeah.
this really isn't the place to talk about personnel issues.
Right.
And I take those seriously, and I will bring them to you in executive session, and if there's a point at which they need to be public, we can certainly do that. But I do appreciate you putting in the employees as protected.
Paloma, were you going to add or suggest anything?
Oh, just that I appreciate that, Chris, you have a thick skin, but if the idea is that we're trying to create this framework long-term, if we should be thinking about, 100 years from now when we have a new city administrator, if we should be thinking about what, about the role more broadly. But
I think the city administrator is fair game here. Yeah. I do. I mean,
I just like the term fair game as for like public comment for a city administrator.
Ren, was there anything that you wanted to add either about language or just generally what your perspective was?
Just thank you guys for workshopping this. I like the language that you settled on. I think you did a great job.
All right.
I would be cautious about all city employees. It's highly appropriate for Chris to say, I have a thick skin. But I think, Paloma, you raised the issue of, okay. I don't know what the right answer to that is, because city administrator sits at the table, has the right to speak, just like any other council member. I don't know about that one, that's all. I'm not worried about this city administrator. I'm just trying to think a little further ahead.
Well, this is also to counter myself. This is also a document that the council has pretty free reign to change from time to time.
and we'll adopt every 2 years.
Yeah. So maybe it's okay that this is somewhat tailored to who's currently behind the table.
I want to thank you guys for the more concise language about hate speech and abusive language. It's much more direct. In the last council, we had, I think, the few free speech issues that council members raised were.
Can you speak into your mic?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was. A couple of the issues that we ran into in the last 2 years were related to hateful remarks, and some of us were really uncomfortable about some of what was said in this room and broadcast on Channel 22. So I'm glad that this is more direct now.
What about removing shirts?
I think that's okay. No dogs.
See now.
No shirt, no service.
I'm not sure we're going to get there. One of those the next time. Once was enough. I just think it goes to level of respect, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I also just want to throw out there, I want to thank members of the public for like really bringing this to the to our attention and saying, like, emailing us, talking to us, telling us that you felt like you weren't being heard, and we really do want to make sure that we're listening and that we find ways to meet your needs and to have a conversation. I know that this exact structure isn't the most conducive for conversation, but we want to listen and make sure that you have an active role and that you're heard.
Yeah, I really appreciate the new number one. Molly pointed out that there was nothing in this that said that we explicitly said that we want to hear from the public. Which is true, but we didn't say in the guidelines, and so I really appreciate, Molly, that you added that at the top.
Great, thank you. Good. I don't think we need to go through every part of this. I don't know if there's a benefit to the public to doing that. For those who are listening or hear recording later that are interested, that in the current packet it's outlined. I don't think we'll vote on it now to give the public a chance to provide feedback at our next public comment session. So maybe it'll make it onto the agenda for March 28th. I'll leave that.
We had it on the agenda for the
21st. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was skipping ahead 2 weeks. Yes, so if you have thoughts about that, you can either email it to any one of us or come share publicly, whatever works for you as a member of the public. And the one adjustment that I'll make is it sounds like we're okay with adding in the city administrator for our version of it. And Chris, if you feel differently, you can let me know once you've had a chance to sleep on it. And then I think the other thing was right at the beginning, we talked about respectful language, which isn't named in here explicitly, but I think the opinion was that it was captured in here. Is there other thoughts about that? Should we try to work in that kind of specific phrase?
What's tricky for me about the respectful language bit is that there's a distinction between what is allowed and what is effective. And I think that we should allow as much speech that is not explicitly hateful or abusive. But I also absolutely appreciate the fact that sort of communication 101, disrespectful language is not very effective. In many instances, but I don't think that we should be necessarily regulating that.
Great. You're nodding your head, Justice. Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, again, I just want us to be careful that we don't end up contributing to the deterioration of our ability to have conversations with everyone, right? So there's some language in there, because again, I'm totally in agreement that we don't want to discourage speech. We don't even want to discourage criticism. That's important. But somehow the concept of respectfulness, like, can you yell? Is that appropriate? So there's something in there about decorum in the forum, something, or manner in which encourages everyone to both be able to speak and to be able to listen.
I like the word civility, so if you want to put in the word civility at some point. There's a great book called Choosing Civility by Forney, and it talks about this because there has been a breakdown in civility across institutions. And again, I would argue that makes the communication less effective.
I mean, I would say on the whole, I think somebody said this before, our politics in Beacon and is pretty civil on the whole. Our electoral politics are too. I'm wondering if maybe we can err on the side of the First Amendment and speech, and then find that if things do deteriorate, that we could revisit and maybe make some corrections, additions to it, and just keep an eye on that. Because, I mean, I don't want yelling in here, of course. But if someone is angry enough and it's righteous anger, I also don't want to say you're not allowed to yell. I don't know. I don't want yelling, of course, and I want civility, and I want Beacon to kind of continue to be a model for how we treat each other and talk to each other for the area. But I'm also cautious of just kind of saying there's things that are not allowed in this room, hold your temper and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think you balanced it well with your language.
Okay, great. Mayor Kyriakou, if you feel differently, we can work together, you and I, to propose some other stuff, because we can add it in and just call it out before we vote on it, or not, if we find, as been said, to stay with what we have, and if we run into any issues in the future, we can always bring this back again and again and again, as it says in the very rules itself in the end. So, great. All right, I'm good.
Sorry to interrupt. I can just make one or two comments. In section 8A regarding presiding officer, I believe something got lost at some point in the formatting of the document at some point, because it says the mayor shall determine who presides at all meetings of the city council. That should read the mayor shall preside at all meetings of the city council, because if you read that paragraph, each meeting, the mayor would have to determine who resides. It talks about in the mayor's absence, but I think it's understood. It is the mayor who presides at the meetings, and then in the second sentence, in the mayor's absence, the acting mayor. And the mayor has the inherent authority to appoint someone else, even if he's present, he or she is present at the meeting, such as he's done tonight. So I just think that's just a typo that needs to be cleaned up in 8A, presiding officer.
Yeah, so is it just a matter of, removing determine
Shall.
who? So just as the mayor
Yeah.
shall preside at all meetings?
Exactly, correct.
Great, thank you, Nick. And you said there was a second thing, did I miss that?
No, the second item was just some context. What these rules were created, I think one of the first things I worked on here is when I came to the city council in 2010, because the city council didn't have any rules and people would get up and there wasn't that maintenance of order. And one of the things we want to ensure is that there's uniformity, that everyone is treated the same and you're not looking at the message. And so that's what these rules have done over time. And I think what's being discussed tonight and over the years it's been nice to see the evolution of these rules, because there are some communities where they don't allow public comment. Under the law, there's no obligation to allow the public to provide comments. Only at a public hearing do you have that obligation. And Beacon has always had a standard of allowing and encouraging the public comment. So these rules were designed with that in mind, and it's good to see that continue forward. And the one item we discussed is that if people submit written comments, they should understand that those are allowed. Those will be included in the public record as indicated in the policies and procedures, but they can't be kept confidential. There's no such thing as a confidential under the FOIL. There may be things that would be exempted should it be personal in nature, but generally comments that are submitted are made public as part of a public record.
Yeah. And that's a good reminder to the public that if you email stuff to us, it is possible it could appear in the public record in the future. So just know that when you email us.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of those clarifications, Nick. It does also remind me how these rules apply to all of our committees. It was brought up to me recently that while we have made the decision to continue to have our council meetings be hybrid, how that may affect our committees and their meetings and continued accessibility to those meetings, and if the guidelines that we're setting forth here can or should apply to committee meetings.
Sure. These only apply to the city council meetings. Generally, each board or committee would decide how they wish best to run their meetings. Planning board, zoning board, or any of your committees. It would be unusual to create these rules that would apply to those committees. You could certainly encourage them to do so. I guess you could also adopt a uniform set of rules, but I think you would want to encourage each board and committee to use yours as a model, adopt it as they see fit to how they run their meetings. In terms of the hybrid, that's really governed by New York State law. Right now, we're able to meet, the board members are able to meet hybrid because the new, governor has an executive order has declared rather a state of emergency, so that allows boards to meet virtually. When that state of emergency goes away, boards will have to meet in person unless you're an advisory committee or not acting in a statutory capacity, and those committees could continue to meet virtually.
Nick, was that extended? I know originally that was going to expire tomorrow.
Right, that there's not been any word. It expires on the 16th, and there's been no announcement as to whether or not it will continue. I expect it will continue for another month or two.
And that doesn't stop us from having hybrid meetings. It just makes sure
That's
that
right.
it's just a little more difficult when a member of the board who votes, we would have to notify the public in advance that you're going to be remote and where they could go to see you be remote.
Yeah, and I think we've been fairly clear about these Monday meetings. I guess I'm just concerned for the public who may want to attend a committee meeting who have been logging in online to do so, if that's going to continue to be available to them.
We actually bought a second Zoom account for the committees.
Oh. Great.
So, yeah.
So our committee meetings will continue to also be on Zoom for the foreseeable future?
The ones that are now, yes. They're not all on Zoom.
Got it. Great.
Great. Anything else before I pass it back to George?
I just want to say thanks for all the work and thought you guys put into this. This is great.
Great, thanks. All right, back to you.
Thanks very much, Molly, and Paloma, and Justice. Thank you very much. Okay, well,
We did, sorry, I had one more item. I think we decided that for workshop meetings, if we had other things that we wanted to add at the end, we potentially could. And I was hoping to, I don't know exactly formally how to do this, but to revisit the idea of participatory budgeting, and wanted to discuss where in the agenda we might be able to continue talking about what to do with the money that we set aside for this project.
We actually have been laying out the next number of meetings just to understand how we fit certain things in. And Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have participatory budgeting in the second meeting of April. So, and I think that was on your agenda at that time.
It is, yeah.
So
I'll check now.
Thank you.
Great.
And that way, if you have, it's helpful if you have any documents to send them in advance, like if you've drafted parameters for the participatory budgeting, or you have, I don't know, like an application or anything that would serve as backup. If you can get that in advance, then we can get it into the packet.
Thanks.
Council, Mayor, and City Administrator, we have that on for April 11th. Participated budgeting on for the 11th.
Thank you, Ben.
I think part of this, we wanted to have a broader conversation about civic participation. Is it possible we could just have something on there for, like, you know, what are our civic participation goals, and what do we think a thriving participatory democracy looks like in a town like Beacon? Maybe that'll help inform what we want to do with participatory budgeting too.
If you have any models of other municipalities that you're aware of, Dan, that are doing it well, that would be great, just to have kind of something to root us in as terms of how we determine our goals.
So the things that other communities are doing well was something that was basically like holding elections, choosing projects, and it was quite involved. And we kind of pulled away from that last year because it was going to just take up too much city resources to do it. And so where we left off with this, I think, was that we wanted to entertain different ideas of what participatory budgeting could be. Maybe it's just, you know, us being responsive to things that we hear in public. Maybe it's something that we want to do with school children and have them work on, you know, decide on a project. So I think we want to throw everything on the table, but I can bring the basics for what it looks like in other communities. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And I would generally recommend looking at the participatory budgeting project that has, they run the program in New York City around this topic, and Ecological Citizens Project, which is based just south of us in Phillipstown, and Jason Angel, who is a town, what is exactly his title?
Town board?
Town board member, another municipal official, just south of us, runs that program and does a really, really great job. So hoping to get his expertise shared with us.
Yeah, I think it would be important to understand what are models for communities our size. So, New York City, you know, I got 50 council members. That means one council member represents 160,000 people. So one council member represents, you know, a place a dozen times our size in its entirety. So I think it would be important to understand we've got a ward system. There's something to be done here, but it just has to kind of fit for purpose, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just think about that.
Yep.
Yeah, New York City isn't necessarily the best example, but Participatory Budgeting Project does work across all size municipalities. So we just will pull out the most applicable examples for sure.
Yeah, it looks like Kingston did something in 2019, so.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll add that additional language on the agenda so that it's broader than just participatory budgeting, but it includes it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, And the participatory budgeting project in particular has staff that might be willing to come and speak to us if we do decide to go in that direction.
From what group?
Participatory Budgeting Project is the name of the organization.
Participatorybudgeting.org.
So if you want them to come to a workshop, why don't you send me on a contact and we'll see if they want to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been trying to, as you can see, have one external speaker each meeting if possible. And we've, again, to continue to inform and have back and forth. Great.
I've been waiting to adjourn this
Hit
meeting.
hit that gavel.
No executive session?
No, we don't have anything on executive session, so we backed that off the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
George, this was an
officially
amazing
adjourned 40 minutes later than I would have preferred.
George, you were wonderful.
I hereby resign my gavel.
All right. Thank you all.
We just need a motion to adjourn in a second.
Motion to
Motion.
adjourn.
Oh, motion to
Second.
Second.
details.
Ren and Lee.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
See y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Good night.
night.
Thank you.
I think we did.